Samantha Reed has always believed in the power of perseverance and humility. At the age of 38, she has a quiet confidence built through years of dedication and relentless challenges. Samantha is a woman of depth, though you might not realize it as she moves through the hospital hallways in her simple nurse uniform. Today, she is filling in for a colleague on leave, taking on tasks she hasn't done in a long time. But this doesn't bother her. Samantha is not one to flaunt her title, and no job is too small for her. She began her nursing career after paying her way through medical school, with long study hours and sleepless nights fueled by unwavering determination. Coming from a modest family shaped her into the compassionate leader she is today, currently serving as the medical director of one of the city's most renowned hospitals. The road to the top was by no means easy. Samantha grew up in an impoverished area where opportunities were scarce, but she never let her circumstances dictate her destiny. Instead, it became the driving force that pushed her forward. Nursing was the first step, but her dream was always to reach higher and make a greater impact on her community. Over time, Samantha's professionalism and dedication were recognized by her superiors. She was promoted and eventually became the medical director. Despite reaching such a high position, Samantha has always maintained her humility. She believes that leadership is not just about titles, but about deeply understanding and empathizing with those who work under her and the struggles they face. For this reason, even today, she wears the nurse's coat, ready to step in whenever her team needs her. Most staff members know who she is and respect her for her humility and ability to help in times of stress. The hospital where she works is a high-end medical facility, serving wealthy and influential clients. It is renowned for its modern amenities, advanced technology, and top-notch professional team. However, this hospital is not without its flaws. The work environment has a clear hierarchy, with a distinct separation between doctors and support staff. Nurses, in particular, often face this discrimination. Many doctors see themselves as superior, not only because of their titles but also because of their worth, and they display a lack of respect towards the nurses. Among the doctors is Dr. Michael Reynolds, a middle-aged white man who has spent his entire career climbing the ladder of fame. He is known for his medical skills, but he is also infamous for his arrogance. Although he has an excellent track record with patients, his colleagues, especially the nurses, find him unbearable. He treats them with disrespect, issuing orders without ever saying thank you or apologizing, and his attitude reveals his contempt for nurses, viewing them as inferior. For Dr. Reynolds, respect only comes from those he considers his equals or those with higher status in the hospital's hierarchy. Samantha had heard about Dr. Reynolds, although she rarely met him in person. She had received numerous complaints from the nurses under her, but she always handled the issues delicately. Her goal has always been to change the hospital's culture rather than criticize individuals. Still, she knew that one day, she and Dr. Reynolds would have to face each other, especially in a hospital where power and internal politics were ever present. And today, that day had arrived. Dr. Reynolds arrived at the hospital in his usual rushed manner, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. His day was packed with surgeries, consultations, and what he considered the bothersome task of managing patient expectations. He had no time for delays or mistakes, especially from the nurses, whom he felt were often too slow to keep up with his pace. As he entered the area where Samantha was temporarily working, he glanced around without paying much attention to the staff in front of him, considering them merely as nurses, nothing more. Samantha, busy reviewing patient files, didn't notice him at first. She was focused on ensuring everything was for the patients she was caring for, her actions gentle and purposeful as she moved from room to room. She had no idea that Dr. Reynolds had entered the room and was about to make assumptions that would lead to an inevitable confrontation between the two. Before he spoke, Samantha glanced up slightly, giving him a polite nod but continuing with her work without appearing overly attentive. Dr. Reynolds didn't respond but immediately focused on Samantha, his expression hostile as if something had annoyed him from the start. "Are you planning to stand here all day?" Dr. Reynolds snapped, his tone cold and contemptuous. "I need these patient records updated. Can't you follow simple instructions?" Samantha replied calmly, ignoring his attitude. "I am following the procedure, doctor. The files will be updated as soon as I finish this task." She didn't rush, her eyes still on the documents, her voice steady. "Please be patient, doctor." Dr. Reynolds, interpreting Samantha's calm demeanor as a challenge, decided to push further. He looked her up and down with a disrespectful gaze, then spoke in a contemptuous tone. It's interesting how someone like you managed to keep this job. Do you think you can handle complex patient files? You look more like someone who just wants to organize paperwork. Samantha paused briefly but didn't let herself be intimidated. She raised her head, her eyes bright and fearless. With all due respect, doctor, what I am doing here has nothing to do with who I am or where I come from. This job requires hard work and discipline, qualities I believe I possess. She emphasized each word, not allowing his insults to affect her. If you're not satisfied, I won't hesitate to report this issue to the higher-ups. Dr. Reynolds, unable to tolerate this defiance any longer, replied with a harsh tone. Do you think I'm afraid of your words? You're just a nurse, and you'll never understand the pressures of a doctor's work like mine. You don't belong here. And no matter how long you work, you will always be beneath us. That will never change. Samantha didn't back down. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. Perhaps you've forgotten that this hospital isn't run solely by doctors like you. Everyone here contributes to this place, and all of us deserve to be treated with respect. Her voice was calm yet resolute. You may not understand that, but I don't need to prove this to someone like you. Dr. Reynolds, feeling challenged by Samantha, continued to sneer at her. He stepped back, his gaze cold, his voice filled with contempt. For someone of your color, I don't understand how you managed to stand firm in a hospital like this. Do you realize that this job isn't meant for people like you? His tone was as sharp as a blade, full of disdain. No matter how hard you try, you will never be seen as equal to us, the ones who truly belong here. Samantha didn't flinch, though his words cut into her heart like a knife. She looked straight into his eyes, refusing to let his racism deter her. You may say I don't belong here, but that is something I will never accept. I've worked hard to be here, and I deserve respect just like anyone else. No one has the right to judge me solely because of the color of my skin. Dr. Reynolds, sensing Samantha's strong resistance, growled, no matter how hard you try, you'll never change that. Yes, this hospital has people like you, but you're just a shadow of those who truly have worth. Samantha responded with a firm, unwavering voice. I won't let you or anyone else determine my worth. I will never allow your racism to break my dedication and commitment to this work. Their confrontation grew more intense than ever, and in that heavy atmosphere, Samantha stood her ground, refusing to let anyone demean her for such unfounded reasons. As the tension between Samantha and Dr. Reynolds escalated, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. A nurse, pale and visibly alarmed, rushed over to them. She quickly stopped in front of the two, barely catching her breath, and urgently announced, "Excuse me, Dr. Reynolds, Samantha, a patient has just been brought in extremely critical condition. Immediate surgery is needed. There's no time to lose." Both Dr. Reynolds and Samantha stopped arguing, their expressions instantly turning serious. Samantha immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Despite the heated argument reaching its peak, a life could not be ignored. Dr. Reynolds, though still visibly angry, turned to the nurse with a swift professionalism. "Lead the way and let's get to work. There's no room for hesitation in this situation," he said, his tone shifting from anger to decisiveness. Samantha, refusing to let the tension affect her focus, looked at the nurse and said, "Lead the way. Don't worry, I'll do my best." Without delay, all three rushed off, fully concentrating on saving the patient in this urgent situation. Though their confrontation remained unresolved, at this moment everything centered solely around the patient's life. In the operating room, the tension was palpable, almost as if it could be cut with a knife. Under the bright lights, both Samantha and Dr. Reynolds focused intensely on the surgery. The patient, a middle-aged man, lay on the operating table, his weak heartbeat visible on the monitor. Every movement from the doctors and nurses had to be precise. There was no room for error. Samantha, maintaining her calm with sharp observational skills, watched Dr. Reynolds' every move. She noticed he was beginning to work hastily, taking steps out of order, his hands trembling as he operated, and making decisions that appeared impatient. This immediately concerned her. Dr. Reynolds was not following proper sterilization procedures, handling instruments incorrectly, and failing to change gloves when necessary. Samantha couldn't remain silent. She double-checked the orders and glanced at the patient's monitor, where the heart rate and blood pressure readings began to show unusual fluctuations. Something was wrong. If she didn't act immediately, the patient's condition could worsen. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the situation was far too critical. Dr. Reynolds, stop. Samantha interrupted, her voice cold but filled with determination. You're not following protocol. If you keep going like this, the patient's life will be at risk. Dr. Reynolds spun around, furious. Who are you to be ordering me around? I've been doing this for decades. He shouted, but his anger couldn't hide the unease in his eyes as he noticed the changes in the patient's condition. Don't let your arrogance ruin everything. Samantha replied, her tone icy but urgent. These mistakes could kill someone. Stop the improper procedures immediately. The patient's heart monitor began showing signs of deterioration. They only had a few seconds left. If the issue wasn't corrected immediately, the surgery could end in disaster. Samantha quickly reached out, adjusting the positioning of the instruments, changing her gloves properly, and pressing the alert button for additional nursing support. She no longer had time to worry about pride or the tension between them. She had one goal: saving the patient's life. Look, the heart rate is dropping, Samantha shouted, snapping everyone in the operating room back to full awareness. She continued performing the surgical steps correctly, issuing orders and monitoring the patient's condition without pause. Dr. Reynolds, now devoid of his usual arrogance, hesitated for a moment before stepping back, forced to concede to Samantha's assertiveness. He tried to correct his mistakes, though his eyes revealed his anxiety. Every passing second mattered. Just moments ago, the patient had been in critical danger. But thanks to Samantha's timely intervention and decisiveness, the patient's condition gradually stabilized. The patient was no longer in immediate danger, at least for now. Samantha exhaled with relief, though tension still lingered within her. The operating room fell silent. No one said a word. Afterward, Dr. Reynolds stood silently for a moment, finally lowering his head. "Thank you for saving his life," he said quietly, his tone subdued, lacking the arrogance he previously displayed. Samantha looked at him coldly but did not respond. She turned away and resumed her work. She knew that life and death were only a small mistake apart, and today she had stood on the edge of that line. After a tense morning filled with unforgettable events, Samantha decided to call an emergency meeting to improve the quality and working environment at the hospital. She understood that the recent mistakes, especially the tensions between doctors and nurses, could not continue without change. Moreover, the discrimination and lack of respect among medical staff were directly impacting work quality and patient safety. With determination to change this reality, Samantha called an urgent meeting. She sent an immediate notice to all department heads, chief nurses, and key personnel. The meeting was not just about improving procedures, but also about enhancing communication and mutual respect among departments. It was only upon entering the meeting room that Dr. Reynolds was stunned to realize that the woman he had disrespected and openly criticized was, in fact, the hospital director, someone with a position far higher than his. He entered, still carrying his usual confidence, but as soon as his eyes landed on the nameplate on the table, the woman standing at the head of the room with a serious expression left him speechless. Samantha stood there, her gaze resolute, without a hint of hesitation. Dr. Reynolds suddenly realized that his previous criticisms during their confrontation were not only thoughtless but completely wrong. She was not just a simple colleague, as he had assumed, but the leader of an organization he had considered beneath him. The moments of hesitation before entering the room had now turned into a painful realization. Dr. Reynolds could feel the cold stares of his colleagues fixed on him. Everything within him suddenly felt uncertain, a stark contrast to all those times he had been arrogant, thinking his position and title would make others submit to him. But now, everything had changed. And the truth was, he was the one under Samantha's leadership. Samantha paid no attention to his discomfort. She started the meeting seriously, letting no irrelevant thoughts interfere with her work. Just a simple statement from her was enough to command the attention of everyone in the room. This hospital is not a place for discrimination or displays of personal power. Everyone has a role to play, and we must respect one another. Samantha didn't let Dr. Reynolds' hesitation or discomfort slow her down. She continued with determination, her tone firm yet compelling. "This morning I witnessed behavior that is completely unacceptable," she began, her gaze steady on Dr. Reynolds. "And I cannot allow such conduct to continue without addressing it directly." All eyes in the room were on Samantha as she recounted the events. "While I was working on the floor, Dr. Reynolds treated me with blatant disrespect. Not only did he issue orders without a word of thanks or apology, but he also displayed clear discrimination simply because I am a person of color. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. More importantly, his working procedures were flawed, procedures that could have led to a patient's death. The room fell silent, the quiet as impactful as a powerful blow. They couldn't believe that the doctor they had always regarded as highly competent could make such a critical error. All eyes turned toward Dr. Reynolds, who now appeared visibly flustered, unable to refute what had been said. During the surgery this morning, Samantha continued, he skipped a critical step in the patient's pre-surgical assessment. It was the final verification of the patient's condition, a step we can never afford to miss. This oversight put the patient in danger. Thankfully, there was no immediate deterioration, but had we not intervened in time, the patient might not have survived. The conference room was silent. Samantha's words were like a slap to the self-assuredness of those who believed that doctors were infallible. People began to realize that behind Dr. Reynolds' reputation and expertise lay a dangerous oversight that could cost a patient their life. Samantha didn't stop. I'm not saying this to single out one person, but to emphasize that we cannot ignore such serious mistakes. We must work as a team, respect one another, and adhere to proper procedures to protect our patients' lives. At this point, Dr. Reynolds could no longer maintain his self-assured demeanor. He stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment and the late realization of his errors. A moment of silence filled the room as he faced Samantha, his arrogance and contempt now gone. Mims, Samantha, his voice faltered slightly. I apologize for everything I said and did. I was wrong to treat you that way. And I am also sorry for the hurt I caused you with my discriminatory and disdainful words. Everyone in the room now looked at Dr. Reynolds. The change in his attitude was unmistakable, but no one could deny that this apology had come too late. He took a deep breath before continuing. I also apologize for not following proper procedures in this morning's surgery. I didn't conduct a thorough check as I should have, and I realized that skipping that step could have had serious consequences for the patient. It was a grave mistake, and I regret nearly causing something unforgivable. Samantha looked at Dr. Reynolds, not appearing too surprised, but she responded with calm and certainty. Thank you for acknowledging your mistakes and apologizing. However, an apology can't change what happened. The important thing is that we learn from these mistakes and ensure they don't happen again. We have a responsibility to every patient and each other in this work. The room remained silent, but a change had started. Just a few words of apology, yet it was the first step toward realizing the importance of respect, adherence to procedures, and working together to save patients' lives, not to elevate personal status. After a few weeks, the atmosphere at the hospital had shifted. Discussions on respect and compliance with procedures became central topics in training sessions and meetings. However, no one could have anticipated that Dr. Reynolds, who had once taken great pride in his career and status, would voluntarily resign. One morning in the hospital's conference room, Dr. Reynolds stood before his colleagues, lacking the arrogance and confidence he once had. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes seemed tired, as though the weight of past mistakes had taken a toll on him. He took a long breath before finally speaking. Everyone, I'm here to announce a personal decision. After much reflection and remorse for my actions, I've decided to resign. Thank you all for working with me throughout this time. I know I haven't lived up to your trust, and I understand that this decision is necessary for me to rediscover myself and make amends for my mistakes. He bowed his head and then left the conference room without looking back. Although his departure was not easy for everyone, some in the hospital felt it was the right decision. Taking ownership of his mistakes and accepting responsibility even belatedly was at least an act of courage. While Samantha showed no clear emotion, she understood internally that Dr. Reynolds' decision was a reasonable one. Mistakes cannot be easily undone, and in the medical field, especially in a hospital like theirs, reputation and responsibility cannot be overlooked. For her in this hospital, Dr. Reynolds' departure meant more than just a structural change. It marked a place where true respect and professionalism were prioritized, a place where people worked not for status, but for the lives and health of their patients.